Welcome, everybody. I can't see many people, but I'm sure you're there, and I appreciate you coming this afternoon to learn a little bit about the Research and Education Grant Program here in the Western region of the Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education. And we're going to talk about the pre-proposal today. There's two components to R&E granting. There's a pre-proposal. We'll get some of those. We'll have a review panel to review those and then down select a certain number of those to move forward to a full proposal. And then the full proposal, the people who are invited for a full proposal will actually get a separate set of instructions specifically for them for that full proposal. So my name is Darryl Donahue. I'm the regional coordinator here at the Western SARE, and we'll go ahead and get started. So the Western region is pretty much, I like to say it's kind of from the Montana and Colorado borders all the way out through Alaska, Hawaii, and down into our protectorates, Marshall Islands, and all those areas. So we cover a wide range. Over on the right side of your screen, you can see the different areas we cover. The SARE program, in case you don't know, is sponsored by the U.S. Department of Agriculture, NIFA, National Institute of Food and Agriculture. Our mission is to advance innovations that improve profitability, stewardship, quality of life in American agriculture. And we do that by innovative research and education. Our goals are really the goals of all of the SARE different regions. We like to promote good stewardship, enhance the quality of life of farmers and the rural communities, protect health and safety, increase diversity in your enterprise, and then also like to look at sort of a three-pronged approach of looking at economics, the social, and the environmental implications of sustainable agriculture. So the nitty-gritty of the proposal is this. It starts with a researcher, which could be a PI or co-PI, and then an extension or outreach person, representative. Again, that person can serve, could serve as two co-PIs or PI and co-PI. And then at least three independent producers. And so we say at least three. You could probably have more if you would like to, certainly a minimum of three. There's components of research, and that could be two pieces. You could have an own farm, like own one of the producers' farms where you're doing research, and you might have, say, a plot of land that maybe the university, if you got a university owns, or the nonprofit owns, that you're doing that. So you're maybe making comparisons or whatever. And there's an education and outreach component to make sure that what you're learning from this research gets shifted to other stakeholders, educators, consumers, and everything. The funding for this proposal is $350,000 for up to 3 years. And that's reimbursable to the organization of the PI. So if there's other costs, they have to be subcontracted out from the PI's organization and paid that as a subcontract. And that can go, like I say, the $350,000 for up to 3 years. Want to talk just briefly about who is a producer. Kind of makes some sense to talk about that today. A primary occupation is farming or ranching, and you have a farmer ranch tax ID number, or TIN as they call them. You could be a part-time producer with at least about $1,000 documented annual income from your activities, or the equivalent of that type of number of $1,000 in production if your food is not sold for profit, but is sold for cultural or other indigenous farming operations. And so just to kind of take you through the timeline today real quickly. And I want to say this is shortened from our normal timeline because we had some shutdowns right after the administration changed in January. And then we're obviously in a shutdown situation right now, as probably most of you know. So it's a really quick line. So just got to go through it really quickly. Our call for proposals is open on October 8th. Pre-proposals for the R&E grants due November 10th by 5 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. The pre-proposals will be reviewed by a group of 8 to 10 reviewers, and those will be down selected to a certain number of from pre-proposals to the full proposals that get to move full proposals. That down selection will be done mid-January, and the full proposals will open up so you can start working on those on January 20th. And then they will be due by March 18th at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. And you can see that's a very quick turnaround. Just want to make you aware of that and kind of keep that in the back of your mind. It's pretty fast. We then will have, of the full proposals, we'll have a technical review panel sometime in mid to late May. That technical review panel will score those proposals, and then the full proposals will be selected by our administrative council. And our administrative council are made up of people who help guide us in our work here in the Western region, people from the Western region, producers, agribusiness people, also people from universities and nonprofits and so forth. So that group of people will take the scoring that was done by the review panel, by the external review panel, and look at that and make a selection of those full proposals that will then be funded. Those awards will be announced sometime in August, and those funded projects will begin the 1st of September of 2026. So we'll dig down into a little bit of the pre-proposal, because that, you just kind of remember this timeline. It's posted, and we will post these slides as well as this the recording of this presentation today. So digging down into the pre-proposal a little bit deeper, and this is kind of a new one. All projects, first of all, will begin the 1st of September, as I just mentioned. We have a streamlined pre-proposal, and it primarily contains two components. A summary of what you're going to do, and that has an 800-word limit, and then a project team and producer involvement, which is a 400-word limit. The summary is for 60% of the review score, and the project team is worth 40% of the review score. So it has, our call for proposal has 4 parts, and you need to kind of look at that. You can download that. I downloaded it the other day for something I was working on, so it's out there where you can get to it. You have to read the CFP. We want to make sure people read it, so we actually have an acknowledgement that you've done that. You provide your kind of beginning or basic information, what the subject matter is, the starting and ending dates, a little bit about the budget and so forth. And then you have the narrative that we just talked about, the 2 pieces, the summary and the stakeholder sections. And then you'll have your supportive documents, which will be the CVs of the primary researcher and the outreach person, letters of producer commitment. I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail in a minute. Any letters of stakeholders, like if the Farm Bureau in your state or your protectorate has supported the idea that you have, a letter of support from them, or if you have a commodity group like the Almond Board of California is one I can think of, and that's a stakeholder group, and if you get a letter from them, if your research involves them or whatever. Any references, a section for references that you might reference later on, and maybe you've referenced them just in that short summary and so forth, and any other documents you feel like are germane to for the reviewers to look at. So on the summary, kind of going back to that for a minute, it's broken down into some pieces, total of 60%, as I mentioned earlier. this has to be a producer identified problem and a research question. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute, but there's a number of ways you can do that. And I'll dive into those in just a minute. You need to outline the project's research methods and its economic impact, and explain what you're planning will do to solve the identified problem. You need to outline, obviously, the outreach and education components of your proposal. Explain how they will be disseminated, if it's going to be farm days, or if it's going to be extension podcast, or whatever that might be, and how it will be available to those folks. And then identify the expected outcomes to advance sustainable agriculture in the Western region. And you can, if you have something that, let's say you're working on wheat that might be across a number of different regions, you can talk about how it will advance outcomes broadly across the U.S. But we primarily look at the Western region. Most of the reviewers, if not all of the reviewers, will be from the Western region, and only in situations where we might need to have somebody from expertise from another part of the country, we would reach out to them, but primarily we'll have reviewers from the Western region. So how can you, I mentioned this a minute ago, I was a little ahead of myself. You can, if you work directly with farmers, and many of you do, I'm sure, you can get farmers saying, hey, I got this idea, I think it might be a good idea. Can you think about it a little bit? And you work on that from that perspective. If you are an extension person, or you're a researcher that works with farmers, that's a great way to, a farmer identified problem challenge is what we like to see, obviously. Sometimes commodity groups come up with ideas and recommendations to advance sustainable agriculture. And, you probably, again, if you're in your state or protectorate and you are probably involved in some of these groups, you'll kind of maybe get newsletters or know people up in those groups, and you can ask them for some things, or ask them about your idea to see if it floats well with them and that kind of thing. You may have come across other studies or reports from other places in the world, or other regions in the U.S. That encourage further research on a particular idea that you might have. And you may have done, I know when I was at Michigan State, at the end of every year, the extension folks identified a needs assessment for farmers. It was every couple of years. And so from those needs assessment, we picked up ideas that we might need to work on. So those are the kind of the 4 ways that you can get good ideas from producers and turn them into something that we would like to see at SARE. And the second part, the summary is first part. The second part is the project team and producers' involvement. You just want to list all the project team members. We talked about, you need to have a researcher, an outreach type person, and their roles and responsibilities. And then you need to show specific and clear producer involvement. And you've heard me say that a lot of times, and you'll hear me say it again and again. You need to show that these producers have very much interest in your project. And I like to say have skin in the game. They're going to be there helping you with that project. They may be giving you land to plant something on or work with or whatnot. You need to show their commitment. One of the resources that we have, which I think is a very good resource, is our website. And you can search across all of the projects. If you go to projects.sare.org, and there's a place there you can hit search projects, and you can put in information in the keywords, and you can pick which areas, or you can leave all the areas. You can select all the areas, whatever. You can select a particular region, and you can look at different project types, and different regions have different project types. So you can look at cross up all those, and you can look at what you will see on the forward-facing part of SARE are projects that have been funded and their reports. So if they've been funded and they have a midterm report, or if they have a final report, you can see those and gather the information from those. So this search tool is one of the resources. There, I'm sure, are plenty of others that you could think of, but certainly one of the resources that you can use, and you can kind of get a sense of what SARE has funded in the past. And I think that's really important as you think through how you might construct your project and your outline and your summary and so forth. I told you this was going to come up more than once. Your producers really need to be specific in what they're going to do to help you in your cooperation. They need, it doesn't matter if their letter of cooperation is a couple pages, that's okay. They need to put in there what they're going to do, when they're going to do it, even if they know how much cost, if they're going to give you part of their land to grow something and they say, I'm taking it out of production and I'm not going to get production on that land, and they can quantify that, they need to put the dollars and cents according to that. If they're going to till the land or do whatever they're going to do, they need to tell you what they're going to do. It should explicitly state that. So don't be skimpy on the amount you put in there. Don't say, oh, it's got to be a one-page letter. It does not. Take the time for each letter from your producers to tell us what they're going to do. And I'll stop here and say something I said a few minutes ago. Our review teams will have producers on them. They typically have 8 to 10 people on the review teams, and there'll be at least 2 of those 10 will be producers. So they're going to be people that are going to look at it from their eyes. And I was on review panels when I was in the Northeast region for SARE. And I will say that I always thought I was kind of a mean guy, but it was the producers that were asking the hard questions. Those of us from academia were kind of maybe being a little bit easier, but the producers were asking the hard questions. I found it very useful, and I learned a lot from them asking questions. So be prepared to explain in these documents, both in the summary, but also in the project team, what those producers are going to do so they can see it. It's really, it's hugely important with this. And personally, that's why I like SARE, because you're always involved in producers. We're having their best interest always at heart. Sorry for getting on the soapbox there for a minute. So tips to being successful. Does your idea really address the stakeholder need? And obviously, if you have letters of support from commodity groups or organizations, plus these farmers that want to be hands in there doing the work, that's going to be obvious that it's needed. Obvious that it's needed. Does your idea fit with our goals? And when we read the goals a minute ago, they're very broad. So, but look at those goals to make sure that it's sustainable agriculture. And are we looking at those 3 components of sociological, economic, and environmental? Here's something we ask you to read and say that you've read the CFP, but we also know you can just hit yes and keep going. But read that and follow the instructions. When I'll be instructing the reviewers, and when I will instruct them, I will say, read the CFP and tell me and basically grade the proposal, score the proposal against the CFP, because we put things in that CFP that we wanted to cover and wanted to make sure we covered. And the CFP has a lot more detail in it than the prompts that are on our online submission form. So just kind of remember that. And I showed you that database. It is really a good resource, and a lot of people have used that. And over the last, since we opened our CFPs, I've gotten a few comments, and I've been lucky that I could actually search in there myself and say, well, here's a proposal that sounds like what you're doing. Go look into it in more detail. So there's a wide-ranging proposals there you can see, and maybe you'll find somebody that has a similar idea, but you're taking it in a different direction. That's great, and you can talk about their work when you write your proposal. And the final thing, and I can't stress this enough, don't wait till the last minute. So you probably ought to start today. I mean, just when we get off of here, just start writing. Truthfully, I mean, it's a very quick turnaround. I've written proposals most of my academic career, and it's a very quick turnaround for that. We understand that, but we're just in the situation we're in that we're in now. We have a grants management system, and what you have to do is, I'll talk you kind of really quick through it. You have to create an account. You have to have an account. And then once you create an account, it allows you to do a password and all that kind of stuff. It's typical stuff. Then you can log in, you can start your proposal. Now, I would say to you that this is a pretty good system. It's written by good programmers, but there's some tweaks and stuff, and I've played with it since I've been here, and you know, it's easy to flow, but you have to think like the computer thinks and sometimes. But what actually Miranda, who's helping me host today, has done is she has put together a couple of YouTube videos walking people through that process. And so you can see those, and I'll jump ahead to the next slide. It'll look something similar to this, but you can see those on our Western SARE website under grants and grant writing webinars, or you can go on YouTube and look at that. And it's a tutorial. And again, you can look at it. And if you're having problems, you can go back and look at it and stop and see where you're having problems or whatnot. But I'll think once you kind of get in there and you get the hang of it, it's going to be pretty easy to do. The other thing I will say is, and I've heard Miranda talk about this a little bit, you don't have to start a new proposal every time you go in, because then you're going to have like 10 proposals and you're going to not know which one. So try to remember your login and all that stuff, and go back to that same proposal so you can start adding things to it. And she's kind of pretty good. She kind of watches that stuff goes on behind the scenes, so she can see who's been in there working and stuff like that on the proposal. So watch out. She's going to be checking on for stuff like that. So with that, I think there's some resources here. Our resources actually comes up under westernsare.org or western.sare.org, both ways. You can see have just generally the place. There's proposal preparation documents, and then funded things in your state you could look for, or you could look again across all the regions. And here's my contact information for the research and education proposals. And with that, I'll say thank you for your time today. And I know we may have some questions, but I look forward to seeing your proposal. We've heard from one of the other regions that they've gotten a lot of pre-proposals, but I think that's great, because we'll then have a good group of them to look at and to select from. So I know that you're going to be working on those, and we're here to answer questions. Our job at this point is what I call customer service. We're here to help you. Help you be successful. So with that, I'll stop and see if you have any questions.
The first one is, what fraction of pre-proposals are invited for a full proposal?
Well, I'll have to turn to Miranda, because I haven't been here long enough to see that. It's typically, I'll use the numbers and then Miranda can correct me. It's typically about, if you have 100 pre-proposals, probably maybe 25 to 30. It really depends on the administrative council will help us decide that. 25 to 30 will move on to full proposal. If you want to add to that, please do.
No, I checked the past records since I saw the question come in, and so it's not necessarily a fraction. Typically it's 20 to 30 pre-proposals that will move to a full proposal.
And I'll just remind everybody that those that get selected for a full proposal will get a different set of instructions specifically sent to them. They won't be on the website or anything. They'll be specifically sent to them. Different word limits, as you might imagine. A lot of it, those of you who have written AFRI and NIFA proposals are going to be similar in structure as those proposals. So, in length and so forth.
So the next one is, in the basic information section of the pre-proposal application, there's a question asking us to define a practice. Could you clarify what is meant by practice in this context? Are you referring to agricultural or sustainable practices we are currently implementing in our production, or does this also include practices we are researching or planning to adopt?
I would say yes. It could be both. Currently implementing in production, if you and Miranda's put in the projects, you can see some of the different things in there, but if you are doing something that you currently are doing, in order for it to be novel and innovative, it really needs to be taking that base information you already have and moving it into a different direction. So we're not going to be funding something that you've been doing for 5 years or 6 or whatever, or 3 years. This is not another funding source to continue some of those work. But we will look at something like I'm making this up, but if you're doing alfalfa and you want to do something completely different, we might look at that. They're going to use the same ground, but we might look at that. And so I don't know if that's completely answered your question, but
I can help clarify this one too. So I put a link in the chat to the list of practices, and it does build off of what Daryl's talked about. But mainly, this list is to help with that. If your project's funded for that the search features in the database. We also use this list to help us identify reviewers. So I guess don't worry too much about which ones you pick in this one. It's more informative. It's not scored.
in fact, I was at a faculty meeting today talking about SARE earlier, and somebody said, "Are all the reviewers from the Western region?" And I mentioned that earlier, just to say it again. We typically try to get people from the Western region. We try to get a wide variety. We like to get people from all the areas represented, because they all have input. But only in cases that we have maybe a specialty thing that we may have to reach out to another region or somewhere else, some other place. Like I think last year, I believe it was, we reached out to a region, the Northeast region, to find somebody because of the particular type of thing they were doing.
Okay, the next question is, do we need separate letters of support and commitment, and how many letters of support and commitment are required? And this came in before you went into the details on both, but if you could just touch on that.
Yeah, so, commitment is our farmers, right? Commitment are those farmers that are going to work with you hand in hand. They're going to get their hands dirty. They're going to be down there. When I say that, I'm reminded of Jenny, one of the farmers here locally that I've visited her farm, and she's the type of person, she's going to be there working with you every day to make sure that the project is a success. And that's the commitment type folks. The letters of support are those that are from, like, maybe the Farm Bureau in your state or protectorate, similar, or maybe you have a commodity group. You might have I'm making this up, the wheat growers of Wyoming or something, that kind of commodity group, those types of people support. Does that help further clarify?
Yes, I think so. Okay, this one's a little bit longer. If our project is structured around the cultivation of a specific crop, do all 3 producers need to be actively growing that crop on their own farms to meet the requirement of being meaningfully involved? Or can one or several of the producers contribute in other ways, such as planning, data collection, or outreach, and still meet the eligibility criteria? So is it acceptable for each producer to play a different role in the project as long as their involvement supports the research and education objectives?
Yes, because it could be those farmers that are supporting, like, the outreach part of it. They may be kind of looking over the shoulder of the ones that are growing that particular crop, hoping to learn something so they can pick up on that crop. So definitely getting a wide range of growers that have different skills that can support your research is a great idea. And it's a producer. It defines itself by saying they're a producer, and they can help you in a number of different ways, not only growing the crop, but other things.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Daryl. Okay, we have 12 more right now. Will feedback be provided on pre-proposals that are not selected for the final proposal round?
Yes, certainly you'll get feedback, and that's a great question. Both sets will get feedback, even the, people who are selected for full proposal will get feedback on their pre-proposal, same group. I mean, everybody will get feedback. And that can help you. And in some cases, we summarize the reviewers' comments because maybe we need to put them in context of SARE or something like that. But generally, in some cases, we just, quite frankly, copy and paste them over to you, but you will get that feedback. And if you have questions about that feedback when you get it, you can reach out to me and I'll try to help explain it to you better. It is a blind set of reviews, so we won't say, well, call Jenny. She's the farmer that gave that feedback. We wouldn't do that, but I will try to, if I can't answer the question, I'll reach out to that reviewer and see if I can further help you.
Thanks, Daryl. Okay, so the next one, someone from the University of Guam. Last year they passed pre-proposal, but the full one was not improved. How should we improve the proposal? And there is a follow-up where the reviewer's comment said to express production data of sweet potato chosen for the proposal, but the production is so low currently and they don't have that. That data is not available.
So there's a couple of things I can say. Resubmit your pre-proposal again this year. You'll get a set of it'll be probably even a different set of reviewers, get a different set of comments. So that will help you improve it. If you feel that something like you just described about the sweet potato production is not big enough, then there's a couple things I can suggest that might work for you. You can address that issue in your pre-proposal. Say, hey, this is the situation here in Guam. But you might be able to actually look at data from other places that can support what you're trying to do. So you may search the literature or even search our projects and find other information that can help support you. I'm not sure that's the answer you're hoping for, but that's the answer I can give you today.
Going back to your previous offer to reach out to you.
Yeah.
That would be applicable here as well, because we can see your comments we can see the comments you received last year. The next question, how detailed should the budget be in this pre-proposal? I
think, Miranda, you're gonna have to help me here. We don't ask for a budget here, but you can put and really just a sentence. We expect this to be 2 years and for $280,000, but not any more of the detail than that. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, there's no budget in the pre-proposal. You'll just put the amount that you will be requesting in the proposal.
This is a quick sentence, and since you're at your 800 word limit, you can even make that a very simple.
Yeah, I think you can change it. I think you can change it in your full proposal too.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Okay. It is hard to get a survey done with adequate number of responses. Does personal communications work, or does Western SARE only fund with well-known problems? Then it may lack innovation and maybe regional. Will that be considered?
It's a good question. I'll have to see if Miranda can help me. So in my mind, when I hear that question and I can read it here, I think you're thinking about work that can publish, which I hope you are. And obviously we know that typically, generally, personal interviews aren't publishable, but that doesn't mean they're not creative and help you be innovative. And I actually just read about a week ago, I read a progress review for R&E proposal that had very similar what you're calling. So I think you have to understand that people are going to be looking at, the reviewers going to be looking at this from a lot of different sides. And if there's somebody in that review says, hey, they probably not going to have a big set of responses, but they're going to do, surveys and talk one-to-one with, say farmers, that might be useful to get some innovation, and hopefully people will look at that. And I think it will be considered from that perspective.
Thank you. Okay, can the pre-proposal be 100% research only?
That's simple. It has to have that education outreach, because we really want to see the whole idea of SARE is to do research and education. So that's why we ask for both pieces of it.
Okay, what level of detail is expected in response to past reviewer comments if resubmitting?
Miranda, can you answer that? Because I haven't seen that yet. So
Yeah, there's in the proposal form, there's a, like I need to pull it up. I would take, I guess this is hard. Could you,
you're going to have to address some of the comments.
I would, yeah, I think you have, I'm looking at how many words you have. Oh, there's no word limit. So I would say look at any of the areas that reviewers suggested improvements, and then in that reviewer suggestion section, you can write about how you will make changes based on those.
So there is a section that goes in this that is reviewers response to reviewers comments, I think it is. And there's no limit to that. So you can go into more detail for those.
Mm-hmm. Okay, does framing your project as a long-term project, those projects that exceed 3 years, hurt your chances of moving forward?
So in the full proposal, we will ask you to kind of address if you're going to need more than 3 years to do the work. And I think in the pre-proposal, we don't have that particularly set out, but it would be good to say we anticipate submitting what is it called, Miranda? A long-term.
A long-term project.
Yeah, we anticipate submitting a long-term project because it will take us 6 seasons to get the data. That was an example of that. The crop that I worked with at the University of Maine was Maine wild blueberries, and that was a every other year crop. And so obviously people would have to go more than 3 years to get several years worth of data.
Yes, and I don't think the review, we don't score on that, so we're not
not on the pre-proposal. We do not have a scoring part to that, so you can just say in a sentence, we anticipate this to be a long-term project.
Okay, we have a farmer in Idaho working with Boise State University to develop an AI-enabled regenerative ag living lab for and in collaboration with small-scale farmers in the Boise Valley. Before submitted, I wanted to ask briefly, does this type of applied research and education project combining on-farm data, university research, and farmer-led education fit well within Western SARE's research and education grant priorities?
I would say definitely. I've been studying AI in higher education for about 1.5 years now. And that's something that we need a lot of. You probably, Dave, you probably have know where John Deere and other companies like John Deere are going with their AI stuff. And so I think it's imperative that we move that forward, and a project like yours talking about is certainly welcome. We'd like to see it.
I think we were waiting for this question. The website says awards are contingent on NIFA authorizing funding to MSU. Can you give an update or more info on that?
Well, actually, I was walking over here from my other meeting and I dropped my crystal ball. So I'm not going to be able to tell you when the shutdown will stop and cease and stuff like that. I can tell you that right before the shutdown, we were talking with the regional coordinators, were talking with the person who manages the projects at the SARE projects at NIFA. And he said that we would probably get our funding as soon as the shutdown ceased. He said we would get our funding, is the way he said it, barring any catastrophes that might happen. And that's one of the reasons that we put sort of the caveat in all the CFPs this year. But it's always been that way. I had a friend of mine, as an example, several years ago when I was at the University of Maine, that got an NSF GK12. Some of you might remember those. and she was selected for it. They had sent the notice of award, but obviously no money yet. And the board at the National Science Foundation cut it. So she was already selected, was ready to get going, and they cut it in their May meeting. She was supposed to get her money starting in June. So we can't be 100% sure about that, but I feel pretty confident when the shutdown gets over with, and hopefully that'll be maybe today or soon, that we will move forward and we will have our notice of award and move forward with these granting proposals. So we can buy some time because you have to submit your proposals and so forth. And I'm hoping with maybe one set of cross fingers that it'll be soon that the shutdown ceases.
Thanks, Daryl. Can we add more letters if we are selected for the full proposal?
Add more to that.
I think more letters of support.
Oh, I think
and cooperation.
Yeah, they're not counted against you. They're just added or supplemented documents.
And you can even add update. You can update the letters.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, if you get a full proposal and there's some new data or a new person that wants to be involved or a new way they want to be involved, certainly update those letters. Yeah.
The next is, could you please share when the selected pre-proposals and final proposals will be announced, and also what the estimated funding amounts will be for the selected projects?
I'm reading that. So pre-proposals will be announced in January, all right, to go to full proposal status. And then I'm looking here for in March.
August.
Yeah, August. So we will have in May we will have the technical panel review for the full proposals, and then at our summer administrative council meeting they will make a selection on those, and then we will announce the awards in August. In terms of average budget amount, I can't answer that. Maybe you can.
I wasn't sure if they were asking for the. Well, so each. You can apply for up to $350,000, and typically we fund 10 to 12 projects a year. So I think we have the funding for 12-ish projects.
Yeah, and we'll have some that are 300,000, some that are 280, some that are 350, but we have the funding for about 12, and it's in that particular program.
May I confirm that we don't need to submit budget detail in the pre-proposal? Do we need to express the budget amount?
You do need to express the budget amount, but like I said earlier, to answer a question, it could be a very quick sentence. Our requested will be for 3 years for $325,000. That's a quick sentence.
What are the chances of proposals on cover cropping getting funded, especially if the proposal is for a specific region where cover cropping is not common? Because the past few years, reviewers said cover cropping research is not novel when the region I cover has no cover cropping culture, and new research and education is required. What should I do in this scenario?
So I think one of the things you should do in the pre-proposal is make sure that you address that this would be a new invention, so to speak. I remember they were talking about cover cropping when I was in high school, so it's kind of interesting. But I think you should take some characters and words to talk about why it would be novel in your area. And I think the reviewers will look at that and take that in consideration. If you don't address that, then in many areas it's like we do it all the time, so they're not gonna think it's novel. But if you take some of your word limit to address that issue, I think will be good.
Does a regional cooperation get more credits than only doing one institution?
I don't know that more credit is right. Certainly it gets looked upon as a broader proposal. So in maybe in some reviewers' mind, they may think of it differently, but I'm not sure. There's no extra points if you asking that question attributed to 3 areas doing the research. That's a good thing, I think, I believe that most reviewers would see it that way, but you probably don't get any, I'm sorry, but you don't get any extra points for that.
We touched on this one a couple of times, but do we need separate letters of support and commitment? How many letters of support and commitment are required?
So again, we've mentioned this a couple times, you have to have a minimum of 3 producers, and those are letters of commitment, what they're going to do. If you have 5 producers, those 5 people need to put their letter in of commitment. They're going to commit time, energy, and money to support your project. Letters of support can be from like the Farm Bureau or commodity group or whatever, and you can have as many of those as you feel pertinent to have. But you have to have a letter of commitment from every producer that's involved, and you have to have a minimum of 3 of those.
I suppose for the letters of support, you need at least 1.
Yeah.
But more is better. I will combine these 2. We have an ongoing sweet potato virus screening project. Can that be part of the proposal? And I'm going to tag on, can genetic work be a part of the research in combination with field work?
Oh boy, I'm gonna have to hear that one again.
We have an ongoing sweet potato virus screening research project. Should that be part of the proposal? And can genetic work be a part of the research combination with field work?
It can be if it supports the innovation that you're doing. I think, you don't have a lot of words in the pre-proposal, but if it supports the innovation you're trying, then it certainly can be there in both cases.
Do we need Do we need formal producers' letters of cooperation at the pre-proposal stage, or would emails or other communication be acceptable?
I typically would like to see a letter, but I'll yield to Miranda.
Yeah, I pulled up I pulled up the call for pre-proposals. We are looking for letters at the pre-proposal stage. Email confirmation of collaboration is acceptable at this time.
But I will just reaffirm that it has to have in there what that producer is going to do for you in your project. And if they can tie dollar amounts to it, that's even better. But bullet points are great. I'm gonna do these things during the planting season. I'm gonna do these things during the growing season. I'm gonna do these things during the harvest season, for example. That would be great. Outline it very well.
Yeah. Essentially, we need the documentation that the producers are involved in your project at the pre-proposal stage. And then, so letters of commitment cannot be considered as letters of support.
Yeah, you need to have an outside entity, again, a commodity group or something like that supports that outside of the researchers. I had actually had that question asked to me earlier this week. No, late last week. And it needs to be a letter of support, not commitment, but a letter of support that the almond industry thinks this is very unique and innovative research, something like that. Good. Anything else?
We've cleared out the questions that are in the Q&A box.
We got a couple more minutes left. If anybody else has a question or my answers to any of those questions, please bring one on. My apologies for drinking on the job here. I've talked a lot today, so get my throat wet.
We did have another one come in. Can producers be compensated for their contributions?
In the budgeting process, that could happen. The way that we do the budgets for the R&E proposals, once you've been selected, USDA, probably many of you already know this, but USDA you send a bill in and you get paid. And that, so there's not money in our bank waiting to pay you. So the way you would do that is the primary PI, it will go, the money goes to theirs. And so they would have to submit a bill, you know, for compensation for a farmer for, let's say, running her tractor for so many hours or whatever. You'd have to submit that as a bill to MSU in this case. And then it would, you might submit it, if you're at the University of Idaho, you submit it to your folks, and then they submit it to us because you would be contracted with us and pay it that way. But they could be compensated. You should think about compensating them, especially if they're going to put some of their, you know, their labor and materials and using their equipment to support the project, certainly.
And I will include, I know in the past reviewers and our administrative council like to see that producers are being compensated for their time and contributions. We don't have a set directive on what that should be. But it's just a discussion you should have with your project team when you get to that budget development.
Yeah, and so just remember, you don't have to have a full budget for the pre-proposal. But you know, talk with those people and say, you know, how can we compensate your time and, you know, for your equipment, whatever, and do it. And Miranda said it. Producers love to see that because they're helping us, and so we want to help them. Well, any other things?
No, I'm gonna none of us are coming in. We're almost at 5 o'clock.
So I want to thank you for coming today, and we will we'll post this webinar in its recording form. I know I have a funny accent, so you'll have to listen through that. But please reach out to that wsare-re@sare.org will get you to me, or get to me, I should say it that way. And I'll try to I usually try to answer within 24 hours and sometimes faster than that. I got a couple I need to answer, so I'll still be in the 24-hour window here in a few minutes. But thank you, everybody, for your time, and I hope this was helpful for you.